Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about what I think is the start of an amazing story, introducing the first issue of a miniseries called Superman: The Last Days of Lex Luthor. This is a 3-issue miniseries that has undergone a lot of delays from what I understand. I think this first issue was published in 2023, and at the time of recording this, the second issue doesn't even have a release date, so editorial really screwed this one up. But let's just enjoy this first issue right now because it's amazing on its own. This was written by legendary writer Mark Waid with art by Brian Hitch. And you know, I don't think I've done a single video relating to Superman on this channel ever, but I would like to get into him more if people respond to it, because I genuinely believe that he is one of the best characters in fiction of all time when he's properly utilized, like he is in this story. And even though it's an Elseworld story, I think it gets to the heart of what makes Superman such a good guy, and it has a really interesting premise. So I'm excited to get into it. Let's stop wasting time. So automatically, with some of that gorgeous familiar Hitch art, we see Clark Kent at his desk, what looks like at the crack of dawn, staring at a blue screen and reflecting on a very vague memory of him like banging on a door of a building that's on fire, screaming, "Lex, Lex, I'm sorry, let me in." And we see this really like haunting look at Lex, like inside this place, just burning alive, it looks like, before we see Clark get up, lean forward, and start typing on the screen, "The Last Days of Lex Luthor" by Clark Kent. We then jump to an island just off the coast of Bangladesh, a tiny little society, a tiny little landmass that's apparently a mere 6 feet above sea level, getting absolutely assaulted by this huge like robot, like this big mech thing just pounding on the ground, just stirring up a ton of chaos, sending the locals into a panic, sabotaging the fault lines of the island, and essentially like trying to sink the island until we see Superman swoop in, save the day. Everyone is like falling to their deaths until he swoops in. We see this huge tidal wave going through the streets, about to mow everybody down, until Superman turns it to ice with his breath, saving people trapped under rubble. But as long as this massive thing is causing this trouble, you know, it's not going to help. Saving people is not going to help. This massive, gigantic mech thing is still just going at it, and Superman just has to try and attack the legs, rip it open. He rips the roof off of this thing, and he says, "You. Of course it's you." And inside we see the man himself, Lex Luthor, just sitting there with a deadpan expression on his face, saying, "Hi. Got a minute?" Like, just so nonchalant. And even though in this moment Superman just wanted to rip his face off, he still had to save everyone and counteract the destruction being caused to the island, because, you know, the mech has been neutralized, the man behind it has been exposed, and if he tries to get away, he knows Superman's gonna get to him. So Superman actually drills through the ground at super speed, creating like a little tunnel of echo chambers for the tremors underneath the surface, cutting through the ground at all the right angles in the blink of an eye, just prevents an entire earthquake from ending all of these people's lives. Once that's done, he goes right back to Lex, who says, "Wow, nicely done. That was..." And then he gets cut off. Superman says, "Why? Why would you do that?" Lex is like, "Why? I wanted to get your attention by nearly slaughtering countless innocent people." And Lex is like, "Good thing you saved absolutely everybody then. Or did you?" Superman's mind starts racing, and he's like, "Wait a minute. Lex did not build this huge thing all by himself." And then he remembers India was actually developing a gigantic combat machine exactly like this one. And then he uses his X-ray vision to look through the doors and check the rest of the machine, and sees a ton of dead bodies just strung across the floor. And like an emotional reflex, Superman just charges at him, grabbing him by the throat, and says, "How many corpses are in here? How could all of those lives mean nothing to you? What reason could you possibly have to do all of this just to get my attention?" And Lex very calmly just says, "You have microscopic vision. Look at me." And he does. He looks at his cardiovascular system, his nervous system, his cellular structure, and then backs away from him and says, "You're dying." Lex says, "Very good, doctor. It's actually rapid cellular decay." "How did this happen?" Superman asks. Lex then goes on to tell the story. "Oh, same old, same old. I was experimenting with some kryptonite, you know, a Tuesday, trying to see if I could synthesize a new version of kryptonite against you by just bombarding this thing with different forms of radiation, seeing how it would affect it. And eventually it backfired pretty unexpectedly and pretty badly, and the kryptonite sample actually shattered, exploded into a million pieces, and then deflected back onto me. So naturally I had to see how I was affected. I did some blood work, and then I actually found that the cells in my body were burning out. And unfortunately for me, there looks to be no cure. Not even the greatest intellect in human history could come up with anything to save itself. And by my estimate, I only have a couple days left to live. I'm sorry to hear, Superman says. See? Right there. That's signature Superman compassion. The whole world is gonna be dancing in the streets at this news, but not you. And that is what I'm banking on. That Superman won't let me die. You see, in our long history, Lex says, you've consistently demonstrated many irrational traits, but only one that's utterly unfathomable to me. Superman always answers cries for help. Superman always puts others first. He always saves people. Superman made a solemn vow to hold all lives sacred, even mine. Superman then turns around and says, this is a trap. Lex holds up one hand and says, an obvious conclusion, but I can assure you it is not. Go scratch your itch to reassemble this pathetic blight of a city, then do your super senses thing again and see for yourself. Superman does exactly that and is actually able to track the blood flow in Lex's body to tell if he's lying or not. He explains that he has this ability to follow the blood flow straight to an amygdala in a person's body and can actually smell the molecules of dopamine as it's hitting the brain. You're telling the truth, Superman says. But you can't be. You would never willingly come to me for anything. Lex says, that's what I would have said a week ago. I'm willing to lower myself to indebtedness to my worst enemy for 2 reasons. First, and most critically, at the end of the day, I refuse to acknowledge a universe without myself in it. Superman then stops him. Make no mistake, if I say yes, if you live, you will answer for your crimes. All of them. I will see to it personally. Lex is like, yeah, I've taken that into account. And Superman's like, and? And Lex is like, and what? Are you asking me to promise to surrender myself? Are you actually making your aid conditional? No, you're gonna help me whether I agree to that or not, because you're Superman. Superman's like, yes, I'll help you. But we keep this between us. And Lex is like, too late. Then Superman suddenly gets an influx of noise as the universe explodes with sound, his name being spoken around the world all at once suddenly, but not only being spoken in horror. Lex gives him a smirk. See, I might have been broadcasting our entire conversation literally everywhere across the planet. I just couldn't resist seeing the look on your face when you heard the global reaction as you announced to the world that loves you that you were about to save the life of Earth's single most despised villain. And now the world will finally see how easy you are to hate. Superman then reflects back to his Smallville days as a child. We then see Clark walking by as Lex Luthor as a child is being bullied and pushed around before Clark actually lifts his glasses, uses his heat vision, and creates a distraction so Lex can get away. Lex then sees that it's him and says, well, if it isn't old McDonald. Clark's like, you're lucky you got away. To which Lex says, they think I'm a freak today, they'll think it tomorrow. Nothing changes just because I got away. Why aren't you at home milking something? And Clark's like, I got an hour of detention for arguing with the teacher about my grade. And Lex looks at his grade and then the answers that he gave on the paper and says, the answer to the question that you gave is right. It's the question that's wrong. Nobody else in class caught that? Clark's like, just me, but teacher didn't want to listen. And Lex hands it back to him. It's like, Jesus, I realize that calling you the smartest cowhand in Smallville is damning with faint praise, but promise me you'll get out of here as fast as you can. And Clark's like, I like it here. If you just give it a chance, you will too. Lex then starts screaming, here? A village of cavemen? How? And Clark's like, Lex, calm down. It's not that big of a deal. And Lex then runs off. We then get more of Superman's narration. Lex was, to put it mildly, a volatile boy. Anxious, quirky, had really bad mood swings. Whenever he felt unchallenged, he had a tendency to get set off. Lex actually tried to help people every once in a while, but it was always on his terms, and generally he would do it without asking first. And then we see him like taking apart a tractor before someone comes up yelling, hey, what do you think you're doing? And Lex, with his hands still at work, says, your exhaust leaks. I'm converting it to solar. And then he gets cut off by the man who owns it. I said, get away from my tractor, damn it, boy. This is how I provide for my family. You don't touch my equipment without my permission. If I catch you around here again, I'm gonna call the chief. And Lex then walks away. Fine, pollute the whole town, you lack wit. Superman continues, the folks of Smallville were really good people. They just couldn't handle Lex's intensity. Lex saw it differently. To him, their disdain was simply more proof that he was too smart for everyone. for the whole world. We then see the Kent family on a Saturday morning in the dining room, and Superman is just looking at his neighbor Lex as he's building something in his garage. John Kent then looks at him and says, "I recognize that look. Don't spy, son." Clark says, "I'm sorry, it's just I'm worried about Lex." Pa Kent says, "For being an odd duck?" Clark says, "He's been holed up in that lab of his for 2 weeks. The teachers are starting to think that he's dropped out of school. I knocked a whole bunch of times, but he won't come to the door. He's been getting deliveries from all over the world, and I think he's gonna build something. I just don't know what, but with all the parts he's getting, it looks like it's gonna be big." And Ma Kent's like, "What do you think he's gonna build?" And Clark's like, "I have no clue. All I know is he's building it around some kind of weird rock." We then jump back to present day, where Superman is carrying Lex Luthor out to the Fortress of Solitude and actually telling him about it for the first time. So the fact that Lex doesn't know about it tells us that this story is non-canon, but it also tells us that this is very early in Superman's career, very early in their rivalry, so you can expect kind of a more classic and different dynamic than they would probably have nowadays in modern comics. He then takes him straight into the Fortress of Solitude, and Lex is like reacting to everything, saying, "I never took you for a hoarder. I can't believe you actually let me in here." And Superman's like, "It's the only way we can reach Kandor." And Lex is like, "What's a Kandor? And what am I looking at here? Is this some sort of like alien ant farm?" And Superman says, "If you haven't found a cure, then I doubt there's one on Earth," meaning we have to look elsewhere. Superman then shrinks them down to size so that they can go into the preserved cities. He then brings Lex to a lab where all the scientists are. They run tests for hours and hours and hours, and by the end of it, the scientists find that there is no cure. Elsewhere, Lex is frustrated, saying, "Most brilliant scientists in the galaxy. I'd like to meet their PR firm." And Superman's like, "I can think of only one more option, but you know, it's the old thing about how the cure is worse than the disease." And Lex is like, "Worse than dying? How? Just tell me what it is." And it's at this point that Superman tells him about the Phantom Zone. He's like, "This is where the Grand Court of Krypton would exile the absolute worst criminals that we had. Those judged would be without any capability whatsoever of remorse or reform. So naturally, it's perfect for you." And Lex is like, "What are the physics of this place?" And Superman says, "Hit me." "What? You've been waiting your entire life for this opportunity. Go on. Take your best shot." And Lex does, swings as hard as he can, and then punches right through Superman's chest. That is the natural state of all living organisms in the Phantom Zone. So Superman's proposal with the Phantom Zone is basically, since time works differently in this dimension, Lex can hang out here, won't need food or water or anything else, continue to try and find a cure for him, and you know, he can put off dying for a lot longer. Unfortunately, it's at that moment that General Zod appears with his army in the Phantom Zone, and Superman basically explains to Lex that even though they can't touch each other, that's primarily because they just got here. But if you're someone like General Zod, who's been in the Phantom Zone for a long time, you start to build up your own strength, and you become kind of more in tune with the Phantom Zone, and kind of gain more power there. And so what Zod and his army is actually able to do is force Lex and Superman out of the Phantom Zone and back to the lab. And Superman's like, "Well, that's unfortunate. That was basically my only idea." And Lex, all annoyed, is basically like, "Then we're burning daylight. Come on, let's keep going." And as Lex is walking off, one of the scientists pulls Superman aside and says, "Even in Kandor, we are well aware of Lex Luthor's limitless capacity for evil. Surely your world would be safer if he died, wouldn't it?" Probably. "Then why are you so focused on such a monster like this? Why would you risk so much to save him?" And Superman just has a longing look on his face as he thinks back to that vague memory again where Clark is screaming for Lex to open the door, and he says, "I'm sorry, Lex, forgive me. This is my fault," as the fire just continues to burn on the inside. And we don't know what it means. And that's where it ends. Very, very solid, very weirdly wholesome, weirdly friendly story between the two of them. It's really just well written, and putting Superman in these situations where he has nothing left to do but care is really just great. So to have him do that for his worst villain is an amazing story decision. I'm really excited to see the story continue. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you for watching. That is the video.